Okay, so I am actually currently experimenting a little bit on the lighting. I decided to turn off my lights and turn on my lamp lights to reflect the whole room. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I am feeling a little bit lazy right now. I mean, it's been a long day for me. It's only 10, 12 p.m. right now, but I've been up since 6:30 to go to school and then had to finish a little bit of the assignment while having the Sounders and Dynamo game in the background. And occasionally I did kind of watch a little bit, but I kind of just had it on the background, at least listening what actually happened. So yeah, I'm feeling a little bit lazy. I can't really move the table to a position where I usually film it and does not create this kind of bad lighting. I mean, I'm not quite sure if this is actually good lighting or not. I'm just kind of experiment on this, and if this is really bad lighting, then I do apologize for that, and I'll probably will never do this again. But meanwhile, let's talk about the action that has happened this weekend, because you know how last week we had four teams that were on verge of clinching a playoff spot and four teams on verge of getting eliminated from the playoffs, and how only one team clinched the playoff spot. Or no, two team actually. I actually made a mistake last week saying that FC Dallas was the only team that made it to the playoff when the Red Bulls also clinched their playoff spot last week too. So there was two teams that clinched, but there was nobody that actually got eliminated from the playoff. All four teams that were on verge of getting eliminated coming into last week, all of them survived. This week, completely different story. All four teams on verge of getting eliminated, all of them got eliminated. So because of that, that means that the moving forward series is just chugging along faster than Atlanta's potential record of MLS points. And yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what, I already made two moving forward series. I already did Minnesota, or not Minnesota, Toronto FC, and also Orlando City in terms of their moving forward series. The only one I have to do is Minnesota and Houston. And I think I'll do Minnesota tomorrow, and I might do Houston. Well, I can't do it on Wednesday because I'm going to the Chivas versus Pumas game at Avaya Stadium, so I might have to wait to do that on Thursday. And Thursday is the day where I do my preview for the MLS game in the international break. So there's going to be two video on that day too. But either way, let us begin with talk about what has happened this weekend, because there were a lot of crazy things that happened this weekend, and there was definitely a lot of controversy that happened in some of these games because, it's MLS. Controversy is something that is nothing new and is something that always happen at least in one of the game. But we start off in Montreal, where Montreal, of course, got a 3-0 win over the Columbus Crew. Tied there with a penalty, which for one of the few times that penalty was actually spot on by the ref when he called it. Silva with a goal in the 44th, Piatti in the 59th, and overall this was a good performance by Montreal, and certainly a much needed performance for Montreal, considering the fact that they are in a very sticky situation right now where, yes, they have a 2-point lead over DC, but they also have played two more games than what DC has. And I think the remaining game they have is New England and also TFC. So it's not like everything is going to be super easy for Montreal from then on. I know the game against TFC is, I think it's at home for them, and then the other one, I think it's also at home, or it might be at Gillette Stadium, but still, it's not going to be super easy for Montreal in these next couple of games to close out the season, and they just need to pray that DC United will drop some points in these next couple of games, which I'll get to who exactly DC do play when we get to here. But next up, Atlanta. And I forgot to talk about Columbus, who, yeah, That was not a good performance by the Columbus Crew, and there's got to be a lot of worry coming into playoff time, because if you look at their situation, even though that they're probably going to make the playoffs, well, I wouldn't say probably, I think they'll definitely make the playoffs, unless they just lose out all their games and depend on what other teams does around them. It would take just probably the biggest collapse we have ever seen in MLS, even bigger than the FC Dallas collapse, for Columbus to fall out of the playoffs, because they just have so many points, but they're not looking good heading into the playoffs. I think besides NYCFC, this is probably the worst team heading into the playoffs in terms of form. But Atlanta versus the Revs in that game, Atlanta, of course, won 2-1 in that game. George Bello, 16-year-old teenager, got his goal in the 16th minute. I mean, that's kind of a bit of a coincidence, but yeah, certainly congratulations to him getting his first ever MLS goal. I think he's the 6th youngest player in MLS to score a goal. I mean, it's crazy how a 16-year-old can be actually playing in the professional league. I mean, that is just something you do not see in any other sports, which is why MLS is always kind of a little bit different in terms of other professional sport, and you see stuff that you probably would never see with other professional sport here in the States. Gresso, of course, with a goal in the 52nd. Juan Aguilera did get a consolation goal for the Revs, and of course Atlanta got all 3 points in this game, but it does come with a huge cost for them, because remember how last season Miguel Almiron suffered a injury to his thigh back in September? Well, guess what happened this year? He suffered the same injury, and this time it has happened in October, and they're saying that he is going to be out for the remaining of the regular season. So that means for the rest of the season, Atlanta is not going to have Miguel Almiron until playoff time comes, and they better hope that he'll be healthy when playoff time comes, because he is a huge part of this team. This is a big blow in terms of Atlanta's chance of winning Supporters Shield, and I know they do have a good replacement for him. They are now going to put Ezekiel Barco in that central attacking mid, and I know is supposed to be the position that Barco usually play at, but still, with how Miguel Almiron has been doing this season, and how he has been probably a player that a lot of people don't give him as much credit as what a lot of people would give him, because of what Joseph Martinez is doing with this team. But he is the guy that sets up the goal for Joseph Martinez, and losing him is a huge blow in terms of their creativity. And again, with Barco coming in, I don't think it's a really big kind of loss, although you don't know exactly how will Barco play out this season. I mean, so far, Ezekiel Barco, I think, has been a really big disappointment coming into this season. He's definitely have not been what they kind of advertise as a record signing of $50 million. And part of that has to do with him just unable to win a job on that team, and also have that kind of scandal that happened back, I think, a couple of months ago, where I think he kind of kissed a teammate girlfriend or something like that, and that also kept him out for majority of the game, because Atlanta decided to punish him for that. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what Atlanta is going to be doing for these remaining games. Again, I wish I checked exactly the remaining schedule for Atlanta has, but I think they played the Chicago Fire in one of their game, and then there was another game that I actually don't remember. I gotta double check on that. But one of the game are going to be playing against the Chicago Fire, and I think that might be either the last game of this season. Oh no, now I remember. They play TFC in the last game of the season. Yeah, and I remember that because I remember when I was coming home listening to Extra Time Radio, they would talk about TFC and Atlanta being a big showdown, and it definitely is a big showdown, because Atlanta are on a verge where when they get to that TFC game, they could be tied with TFC in terms of that points record that TFC owns last season at 69 points. And TFC will do everything and anything to try to protect that record. They do not want to suffer the same fate that Orlando City fans have to suffer, where they have to watch one of their team or just one of their rival player break a record in front of their home turf. TFC will definitely do not want to see Atlanta break that scoring record in front of BMO Field. It's the last thing that TFC would want to have to suffer in that miserable season that they have been suffering through. And as for New England, yeah, they're done. They're done for the playoffs. I mean, you might as well just put a big E next to New England's name, because there's just no way they're making the playoffs now. But speaking of team that I thought for sure that were done and probably the final nail was in the coffin in terms of the playoff hope, Vancouver, somehow, in some way, they're still in it. After this 2-1 win against TFC, where goals in this game were Talbot and Kai Kamara, and TFC, of course, only goal for them was Josie Altidore, and I think that was on a penalty, if I remember. But also Van der Velde got sent off in this game, and also my camera is losing focus, which I do apologize. But that, hopefully, this thing will refocus as the video goes. But yeah, this is a big win, certainly, for Vancouver, and with now them being just 3 points behind RSL, and also with a game in hand over RSL, you wonder, maybe Vancouver is not dead yet. Although one thing I will say about Vancouver is that they got a very tough schedule coming up next. I think they have to play against Portland on the last day of the season. They have to play against Sporting KC, and they have to play against LAFC on the road. So yeah, that is still a murderous road, and you wonder, will they be able to get some points out of those games and get all 3 points out of those games? I mean, the good news for them is that 2 of those 3 games are at home. The bad news is it's against good team, and it's against playoff team. And another fact that I heard from Extra Time Radio when I was listening on the train from home is that Vancouver have not beaten a playoff team since April. So yeah, that is definitely going to be something that is going to be against them. And unless they were able to beat a playoff team, and not just one playoff team, but 3 playoff team in a row, yeah, I think they'll probably still miss the playoff. They really need to work for it if they want to make the playoffs this season. But meanwhile, a team that have made the playoffs and have officially clinched the playoff, the Union, 5-1 against Minnesota. They did the clinching of the playoff in just probably the best way you could think a team would do. I mean, they put an absolute 5-star showing in this game. Corey Burke with a goal, Bedoya with a goal, Fafa Pico with a brace in this game. I mean, Fafa Pico, what an amazing year he's been having. Now at double-digit goal this season. After last season, he was pretty much non-existent in this team. And just to add the cherry on the top is Zinho with an absolute golazo, and probably a nominee for goal of the week this week, when he just hit an absolute stunner from 30 yards out. And the only goal for Minnesota in this game was Quintero. And yeah, Philly absolutely dominate this game. And this is pretty much the Minnesota we've been used to on the road. I mean, Minnesota, whenever they're on the road, they're literally the worst team in the league. I mean, I think maybe Colorado might be worse, but you could argue Minnesota is the worst team in the league on the road. I just don't understand why they cannot win on the road, but they can win at home a lot. It's kind of weird, but still, at the end of the day, they got absolutely destroyed. And because Minnesota lost this game, they are now out of playoff contention. And again, as I mentioned earlier in this video, I will be doing the Moving Forward series on Minnesota tomorrow when I hopefully have a chance to do it. But yeah, congratulations to the Union, of course, moving on to the playoffs. And I think it's great that now they have officially clinched their playoff position, because now should be no worry about them potentially having a massive collapse heading into the playoffs. And, one thing I will say about this Union team is that I'm still a little bit skeptical of what exactly will happen to them when they get to the playoffs, because as it have shown in the past, whenever the Union even getting into the playoffs, some things just does not go right for them. Like whenever they have a big moment coming toward them, or a big game that they have to win or draw or just get a result out of it, they always tend to fail. And it was evidenced once again in the US Open Cup this year. But to the credit of the Union, at least so far in the regular season, they haven't really shown signs of them just having a big collapse and just having a nervous breakdown as they're in a playoff position, but now all of a sudden they start losing a lot of games and they were out of the playoffs. And now they don't have to worry about that, because now they are in the playoffs officially. And they have a chance to potentially get that fourth position and lock down that fourth position, because with Columbus losing this week, they leapfrogged them, and now they will have a home game against Columbus. And that is definitely very huge for the Union. And yeah, we'll see what happens when they get to the playoffs. Will we see the old Union just fail to deliver in the big moment, or are we going to see the Union that we have seen so far in the regular season, which is when they bend, it doesn't seem like they're breaking now like they have been in past. But moving on into the next game, Dallas, of course, already clinched last week, got a 2-0 win over Orlando City. And this is certainly a good win for FC Dallas, because with this win and a draw by Sporting KC, they now move a little bit more distance away from Sporting KC for that top spot. And, they're certainly in a very good position to lock down that top spot in the West. And, this game was a pretty typical FC Dallas game. I mean, this is a team that I've been saying how they don't really have a true goal scorer, but they always tend to have a guy that usually show up that you are not expecting to show up, and they usually score. And in this case, Mascara in the 63rd and Victor Orilla, who haven't scored in over a year and a half, and he scored in this game. I mean, this team just always find a way to score goals, and which is why I think that is something that I don't think a lot of people have given them credit to do that. And I think you could say that they could be a very dangerous team heading into the playoffs if they continue to be like this. Because so far all season long, FC Dallas have been able to not play pretty soccer, but they've been grinding out resort, and they always find somebody to score that goal no matter what happened. And there's been very few times that they just could not quite find that guy to score the goals. Well, actually, one of the few times that they didn't was against Mike Quake's team. So at least I'm kind of happy about that. But either way, moving on into the next match, Sporting KC versus the Galaxy. Man, this was a tense game. I mean, this game was filled with controversy and certainly a lot of anger toward the Sporting KC side. So, despite the fact that Sporting KC did drew 1-1 in this game, which means that now they have back-to-back 1-1 draw. And is this kind of a sign, again, where Sporting KC is having their usual September elapses? Because usually, if you ask any Sporting KC fan, you will know that this is usually the time this team started to run out of gas and just having bad result year after, or not year, but game after game after game. And then because of those bad results, they find themselves being in a spot where they have to play in the knockout round. They have to play in the first round in the playoffs, and usually that first round game does not end up very well for Sporting KC. But in this game, I do kind of agree that they have the right to be angry about this one and think that they kind of got robbed in this game because, first of all, this first goal, which Zlatan, of course, puts away, and Zlatan, who just cannot stop scoring right now, that's his 22nd goal of the season, and you wonder, will he actually get more than 27? Will he actually even surpass the record that was broken by Joseph Martinez and a record that 3 other players have actually held before Joseph Martinez kind of break that? I mean, it would be kind of incredible seeing not just Joseph Martinez breaking the 27 goal mark, but we will see another player like Zlatan could potentially break the 27 goal mark. But still, you know, if he want to break that 27 goal mark, I think he needs to score like 5 in the next 2 games, which, you know, it's definitely not. It's gonna be he needs to probably at least have a hat trick in one of the game, or at least have a game where he just go completely nuts if he want to catch that or just tie that record. But still, you know, you never know because it's Zlatan after all. But this penalty was never a penalty. And the reason why I say this is not a penalty was because when I believe was, oh god, who was that? Oh, Kamara. When Kamara was driving into the box and Tim Melia was trying to dive to get the ball. Unfortunately, he didn't get the ball, but Kamara was actually jumped over Tim Melia, and when you look on the replay, Tim Melia never touched Kamara. Like, Kamara literally just kind of dived to hope that the referee can give him a penalty, and what do you know? They gave him the penalty, and I don't know if they actually look at VAR for that incident, but if they did, this is another example of VAR just sometime not getting it right, even when it's so obvious that Kamara kind of dived and Tim Melia did not make any contact whatsoever. So because of that, LA leads at 1-0, and then there was another incident late in the first half where David Bingham literally just kind of falcon punched Diego Rubio, and I do not know how in the world that is not a penalty to Sporting KC, and also how that is not a red card for David Bingham. I mean, I know I am kind of a David Bingham hater, and you know, ever since he become a snake and decided to move to the Galaxy from the Quakes, you know, I've been hating him ever since. But any fans would say that that is definitely a penalty, and some fans will definitely say that that has to be a red card because he come in there so late that usually when you see a player hit someone in the head, that is an automatic red card. Now, the reason why I think it might not be an automatic red card is because David Bingham is the goalkeeper. And this is where it just goes back to this old kind of argument about whether or not goalkeeper gets the benefit of the doubt. And in that case, I really think that that shouldn't be the case because, again, you look on the replay, he came in so late. He could have avoided that kind of falcon punch of a challenge on Diego Rubio, and yet he just didn't avoid it whatsoever. He just goes straight into the face of Diego Rubio, and Rubio is very fortunate that he was able to continue this game because he could have easily been knocked out because of that. But yeah, that should have been a penalty. At that point, probably it should have been 1-1. But at least for Sporting KC, the good news is they did not really suffer another bad call, where another incident that right at the end of the half where the ball was coming in from a corner, and then after Emilia saved a kind of shot from the box, the ball kind of bounced right into Stereas, and then Stereas basically hits it or heads it into the empty net. The only problem is that Stereas was offside, and when you look on the replay, he was clearly offside. And at least at that moment when they did look at VAR, they actually make the correct call, which also kind of goes back to what I'm saying about this penalty, and that if they did look at VAR and said that's not a penalty, but when they look at the instant with Stereas being offside and they said that that's a clear and obvious error, then why wasn't this a clear and obvious error? Another example of how VAR has been inconsistent at times, And, fortunately for Sporting KC, they eventually were able to get the equalizer from Johnny Russell. Ashley Cole, I don't know what exactly was he doing. Like, why in the world does he decide to back up so much, thinking that, Russell is not going to shoot it from there? I mean, have you seen Johnny Russell every time when he gets into the box and how he always will try to pull the trigger as soon as he finds some space when he's in the box? Yeah, that's just a classic example of the Galaxy defense of old, and pretty much summarize how bad the Galaxy defense is. But overall, Sporting KC, like I said, they'll be mad that they didn't get all 3 points, because this is the second week in a row I feel that they dominate the whole game, but they weren't able to get all 3 points. And for the Galaxy, I'm pretty sure they'll be happy with this points. I mean, I know they did kind of concede a goal late in the game, but still, you could kind of argue that they were very lucky to get this penalty in the first place. So, I mean, it kind of balanced things out at the end. And, the Galaxy, they do get a huge point against Sporting KC, because now they are just 1 point behind RSL, who I will talk about later with RSL and how, wow, that was a shameful performance there for RSL between them and the Timbers. But moving on, in the next match, I don't really need to mention a lot about this match. The only thing I'll mention about this match is that, for LAFC, goals in this game, Zimmerman and Dio with the brace, and it was so obvious that LAFC was going to win, and this was just a cakewalk for LAFC. And I think maybe the other thing I will mention about LAFC is that this does not really solve their problem in terms of them, getting back on track, because they just play against the Rapids. I mean, anybody these days can win against the Rapids, which is why I am so excited about the last home game of the season for the Quakes, because we're playing against the Rapids, and I can finally see my team win at the stadium for the first time since March. And yeah, I mean, again, it was just as obvious as daylight. And I might as well just kind of talk about the Quakes game in the same way, because this was so obvious that the Red Bulls was going to win. I mean, we actually start a lot of youngster for this game and started to experiment with the squad, which is something that I don't mind us doing. At this part of the season, we have nothing to play for. So you might as well just experiment and build on the future. And little do we know that until today, the future, all the sun is bright as this lamp that I have in the back of my board. I mean, yeah, it can say, at that point we can say that whatever Roston was trying to do in terms of experiment with the squad and put in some youngster, yeah, that clearly didn't work against the Red Bulls. I mean, the Red Bulls got a goal from Alex Mule, BWP with another goal, which, by the way, congratulations to BWP becoming the first player to score 20-plus goal in 3 consecutive seasons. I mean, that is just an insane kind of record for him to break, and I'm pretty sure maybe Joseph Martinez might break that record if he is going to stay along in MLS for a couple of years, because it seemed like he is scoring 20 goals. He's making his life of scoring 20 goals as easy as you would think he would. But still, it's an incredible accomplishment for BWP. And then Aaron Long, of course, with the goal to pretty much put all the doubt and all 3 points kind of clinched when it's only like the 50th minute. The only good thing I will say about this game for the Quakes is that, Wando did score a goal, which means that he is now 1 away from breaking that Judas known as Landon Donovan. And I'm hoping he can not breaking it, but tying the record. And I'm hoping in that Colorado game, he will have to start. I mean, I don't understand why in the world we don't start him in this game. I mean, I know we experimenting the squad, but when you are promoting the fact that Wando is potentially going to break the record, and you even hand out Wando pins as a promoting that, you know, Wando is going to potentially get the record, at least start him for the full 90 minutes. And I expect him to be starting in the full 90 minutes against the Rapids, and I'm hoping that not only he'll tie the record, but he will break the record, and that would be a great kind of ending to the Quakes season. And yeah, then we can, of course, moving forward to life with Martius. I'll meet coming soon next year. I mean, I just cannot wait of how this is gonna end up. I mean, I'm still so excited about Almeida coming in as our manager and what exactly is he gonna have to offer. But going back to the RSL versus Portland game, yeah, what the hell, RSL? You know, I told you guys that you cannot afford to lose any home games anymore, because if you lose any more home games, then you are in a very bad position of missing the playoffs. But guess what they did? They not only lose their home game, but they got absolutely destroyed by the Timbers. I mean, holy crap. This team literally quit after the 70th minute. After Blanco scored that second goal, this team just completely collapsed. After that, Blanco scored another goal, and even Milano scored a goal in this game. Scored his first goal for the Timber ever since he came back to the Timber. The only goal for RSL in this game was Savarino in the 55th minute, but in all honesty, what the heck was that performance by RSL? And that performance really just shows you that RSL probably don't deserve playoffs. I mean, when you are playing a home game, and when you're playing at home where you're so good at this season, getting wins, and you're playing in probably the biggest game of the season, and you're playing against a team that in recent time have really struggled on the road, I was expecting them to get a good win in this game and really kind of make the Galaxy fans really kind of sweating it out a little bit, because now the gap has opened up to 4 points. But instead, you're not only not giving the Galaxy fans sweating out about potentially not making the playoffs for them, you're making your own fans sweating out that you are not going to potentially make the playoffs. I mean, it is just, right now, when you look at RSL remaining schedule, I think they play against Sporting KC next, if I remember. Oh, no, they play against New England, actually. And then after that, they play against the Timber on the road. And keep in mind, they play against the Timber on the road in that final game. But here's what's interesting. This is the only team out of all 23 teams in MLS is not going to be playing on decision day. And that has to be, if RSL coming into decision day, they cannot be in a situation where they are praying that one of the other team can either lose or draw a game for them so that they can make the playoffs, because once they play that Timber game on the second to the last match week of the season before decision day, yeah, that is it for them. Like, all of the things that they can potentially change, and all the outcome that they can potentially change is all set after that game. Which is why, the next game against New England, by the way, at home, is a must-win for them. If they do not win that game against New England, they're done. I'm just calling it. They're done. There's just no way they can expect lose to New England at home and expect them to somehow miraculously beat Portland away when Portland is really good at home. So, yeah, I mean, RSL fan, you might be witnessing for the second year in a row your team just kind of barely missed the playoffs. And this time, I think it's more infuriating than last season, because at least last season, you made a big run to try to go into the playoffs. This season, as what you thought you were going to carry that big run heading in from last season to this season, yeah, that hasn't really kind of happened. In fact, I think this season, RSL have been so inconsistent at time, and they just cannot win road games whatsoever. But as for Portland, big win for them. And because they got this win, I think this pretty much automatically stamped themselves into the playoffs. I mean, I know it's not official that they have clinched the playoffs, but when you look at the position that they're in 4th place, and with a, I think, 5 or 7 point gap over the 7th place team, they're pretty much clinched playoffs as soon as next week. So, yeah, congratulations for the Timbers to unofficially clinch the playoffs and heading back into the playoffs this season. But yeah, talk about now the final game of this match week, as I kind of move the board a little bit because you can barely see like the word from this box right here, although I'm not quite sure if that actually is a little bit better. But yeah, DC United, they did win this game against the Fire. It was a comeback win for them after Raheem Edwards got the surprising 1-0 lead for Chicago, and then their savior Wayne Rooney was able to get them a brace to win it 2-1. And this was a very ugly win for Chicago, or for DC United, because DC really didn't create a lot of chances in this game, and they weren't very clinical going forward whatsoever. And there was also a lot of controversy in this game too, and it all started in the 24th minute when DC thought they were up 1-0 after Lucho Acosta scored the goal, and DC fans think that they were on verge with another 3 points. Unfortunately, when they look at VAR, they found out that in the development of the play, Lucho Acosta actually dragged one of the Chicago player down, and because of that, that is a foul in the development of the play, and I do agree with that call. I mean, it was pretty obvious that Lucho Acosta dragged him down. That is definitely a foul. I know it happened off the ball, and usually when you see that happen, usually referee don't kind of call those foul when it's off the ball, but when they had to go back to like VAR to look at this instant, and they found out that this instant happened, then yeah, the referee did the right decision to try to call the goal back. And then there was the first goal by DC. Originally, Chicago thought that it was offside, but when you look on the replay, looks like one of the Fire players just kept Rooney onside there. I mean, it wasn't a very good angle to see that Rooney was just onside, but he was just onside, and eventually that goal, I think, is a good goal. I don't think that goal was offside. And I think the third thing, and the third controversial thing, and probably the most controversial thing in this game, is this penalty. I mean, feels like this week there's been a couple of penalties that have been just very kind of iffy. Although, like I said in the beginning of the video, except for the Montreal one, that one was definitely a penalty. But this one, it was a very kind of dodgy penalty because it looked like Keppenhoff and Marino was just kind of tangling in the box, and both of them kind of dragged each other down. The referee says it's a penalty, and people were not happy about this call because it looked like Marino kind of sold this move. Like, he kind of got into the body of Keppenhoff, and he just basically brought him down together and win a penalty for DC United. And, this is a bit of a tough one because we have seen a couple of times in the league where when players tangle each other and when players try to embellish a foul in the box, it usually is either a penalty or not a penalty. It's kind of like a 50-50 call at times. So I guess maybe this time the 50-50 call goes in favor of DC United. And, as much as I kind of feel for Chicago fans for complaining that this shouldn't have been a penalty, and that you could say that kind of the ref kind of won this game. You know, when you kind of tackle somebody, get tangled in the box, usually, sometime, most likely the ref is going to call a penalty. And Marino really sold that very well. Like, he really kind of made it look like Keppenhoff really brought him down, when it was really Marino that just kind of dragged his body into Keppenhoff, and they just both tangle up, and in the end it was a penalty. But yeah, that is pretty much it for all the games this week. Again, I apologize if the quality of this video is absolutely awful, because I'm just kind of experimenting with the lighting and the fact that it's been just such a long day, and that I am just totally exhausted, that I don't feel like setting up my usual setup. But either way, hope you guys enjoy this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button, and yeah, I will see you guys next time.